My name is Emily Carter. If you met me today, you would see a successful businesswoman, dressed in designer clothes, walking confidently into my own company's headquarters. But my journey was not always like this. I was not born into wealth. In fact, I was born into a world of hunger, pain, and endless struggle. I grew up in a small, broken house on the outskirts of a city. My mother worked as a cleaner in rich people's homes. My father was never around. He left when I was 5, and my mother never spoke about him. Life was hard. We barely had enough food. Sometimes, I went to bed with an empty stomach. I used to watch other kids go to school with new bags, clean uniforms, and shiny shoes. I had none of that. But I had one thing, a dream. The struggles begin. At school, I was different. My clothes were old, my shoes had holes, and my lunchbox was usually empty. Other kids laughed at me. They whispered behind my back, "Look at Emily. She wears the same dress every day." I pretended not to hear them, but it hurt. I remember one winter day when I was about 8 years old. My teacher asked me to read a passage from a book. I stood up, holding the book with my cold, trembling hands. The other kids had gloves and warm coats. I had nothing. My fingers were stiff from the cold, but I started reading. Then someone laughed. "She can't even pronounce the words properly," a boy shouted. The whole class laughed. Tears filled my eyes, but I didn't cry. I just sat down, staring at my desk, wishing I could disappear. That day, I made a promise to myself. I would prove them wrong. I would change my life. A mother's sacrifice. My mother was my only support. She worked long hours, cleaning houses, washing clothes, cooking meals for families who never even looked at her properly. She came home late at night, exhausted, but she never complained. One night, I found her sitting on the floor, holding her hands. They were red and swollen from all the cleaning chemicals. "Mom, does it hurt?" I asked. She smiled weakly. "No, Emily. As long as you study hard, my pain is nothing." I felt something break inside me. My mother was suffering, so I could have a better life. I had to succeed. There was no other option. The endless nights. I studied under a streetlight because we couldn't afford electricity. I borrowed books from my teacher because we had no money for school supplies. Some nights, I was so hungry that I couldn't focus. But I kept going. I used to sit outside rich cafes, watching people drink coffee, laughing with their friends. I promised myself, one day, I will sit inside, not outside. But life was cruel. Losing everything. One evening, I came home and saw my mother sitting silently. Her eyes were swollen. "Mom, what happened?" I asked. She looked at me, her voice shaking. "I lost my job, Emily." My heart stopped. No job meant no food, no school, no future. That night, we slept hungry. I held my mother's hand and whispered, "I won't let this be our end, Mom. I will find a way." The next day, I made a decision. I would work, fighting against fate. I was only 14 when I got my first job. It wasn't glamorous. I worked at a small bakery, cleaning floors, washing dishes, and sometimes packing bread. The pay was almost nothing, but at least I could buy food for my mother and myself. Every morning, I woke up before sunrise, helped my mother, went to school, and then worked at the bakery until late at night. I was exhausted all the time. My hands were always rough from scrubbing dishes. But I never complained. One day, as I was cleaning the floor, I overheard 2 women talking about scholarships for poor students. My heart raced. This was my chance. That night, I stayed awake, writing my application essay under the dim streetlight. My fingers were freezing, my eyes burning with sleep, but I didn't stop. I had to win that scholarship. The first breakthrough. Weeks passed. Then one day, I got a letter. My hands shook as I opened it. "Congratulations, Emily Carter. You have been selected for a full scholarship at Greenfield High School." I screamed. I cried. My mother hugged me tightly. "You did it, my girl," she whispered. But success wasn't easy. Facing new challenges. Greenfield High was different from my old school. The students were rich, well-dressed, confident. I felt like an outsider. One day, a girl named Sophia looked at me and smirked. "Where did you get that bag?" "The garbage." Laughter echoed in the hallway. I wanted to disappear, but I didn't. I held my head high and walked past them. I was there to study, not to impress them. Slowly, I found my place. My teachers noticed my hard work. One day, my English teacher, Mrs. Harper, called me after class. "Emily, I read your essay. It's brilliant. Have you ever thought about writing professionally?" I shook my head. "No, ma'am. Who would read my work?" She smiled. "The world, Emily. The world will read your words one day." That night, I made a decision. I would become a writer. The setback. Life was getting better, but fate had one more test for me. One evening, as I came home, I saw my mother lying on the floor. My heart stopped. I screamed, rushing to her. She was breathing, but barely. At the hospital, the doctor told me the words I feared the most. "She has a serious illness. Without treatment, she won't survive." My world shattered. The treatment was too expensive. I had no money, no one to help. That night, I sat beside my mother's bed, holding her weak hands. Tears rolled down my face. I had to do something. Turning pain into power. I started working multiple jobs, cleaning houses, tutoring kids, writing small articles for local newspapers. I barely slept. One night, I submitted a story to a famous online magazine. It was about a girl who fought against the world to save her mother. A week later, I got an email. "We loved your story, Emily Carter. We would like to publish it and offer you a $500 prize." I couldn't believe it. My words had value. My pain had turned into power. With that money, I started my mother's treatment. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. The rise to success. From that moment, I never stopped. I wrote day and night. My stories got published in bigger magazines. People started noticing me. One day, a publisher contacted me. "Emily, your stories are powerful. Have you thought about writing a book?" "A book? Me? The girl who once studied under streetlights?" I said yes. At 19, I published my first book, The Unbreakable Dream. It became a bestseller. People from all over the world read my story. They saw my struggles, my pain, my victory. With the money I earned, I gave my mother the best medical care. I bought a house for us. I finally walked into a cafe, not as an outsider, but as a successful writer. A message to you. Now, as I stand in my office, looking at the city below, I think about my journey. To anyone reading this, never give up. No matter how hard life is, no matter how many times you fall, keep going. Your struggles do not define you. Your strength does. I was once a girl who had nothing. No money, no support, no future. But I had a dream, and I fought for it. Today, I am proof that no matter where you come from, no matter how hard life pushes you down, if you refuse to give up, you can rise. So don't stop. Keep fighting. One day, the world will know your name.